"You're overreacting, Emma. It was just a joke." The room filled with laughter as my husband, Mark, smirked, looking pleased with himself. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant, my hands gripping the edge of the table as I struggled to breathe. This was supposed to be his company's annual gala, a night of celebration, networking, and good impressions. But instead, it had turned into a public humiliation, and I was the punchline. Mark had always been charming, the kind of man who could make anyone like him, who knew exactly what to say to win people over. And for years, I had been the perfect wife, standing quietly by his side, supporting his dreams, and ignoring the little digs, the offhand remarks, the subtle ways he made me feel small. But this time, he had gone too far. In front of his colleagues, his bosses, and their spouses, he had decided to turn my struggles into entertainment. The very thing I had confided in him about, my fear of public speaking, was now a joke to be shared over expensive wine and steak dinners. "She gets so nervous even ordering food," he said, chuckling, lifting his glass like he was delivering the joke of the night. "I swear the waiter has to wait 5 minutes just for her to get the words out. Imagine her trying to do anything serious." The room erupted in laughter. My stomach twisted, my mouth went dry, and for the first time in my life I saw him for what he really was. He wasn't just inconsiderate, he was cruel. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat and gave him a tight smile. He thought I would brush it off like I always did, that I would laugh along, let it go, pretend it didn't hurt. But not this time. Because what Mark didn't know was that I had a secret too. A secret that, if revealed, would wipe that smug smile right off his face. I barely made it through the rest of the evening. I nodded, smiled, and let everyone think I was the quiet, reserved wife they had always assumed me to be. But inside, something was shifting. I wasn't just embarrassed, I was done. For years, I had been the one making sacrifices. I had given up job opportunities so Mark could chase his promotions. I had handled our household, paid the bills when he was between jobs, and even supported him when he decided to invest in a business that ultimately failed. And in return, he got to be the confident, successful man while I faded into the background. But tonight, as I watched him sip his wine, soaking in the attention, I realized I had something he didn't: leverage. Mark had always been careful about his image. His whole career was built on his reputation, a hardworking, respectable businessman who had climbed the corporate ladder with integrity. Except that was a lie, because I knew what really happened behind closed doors. A few months ago, I had stumbled across something. Late one night, when Mark had left his laptop open on the dining table, I had seen an email thread he forgot to close. At first, I thought it was just work-related. But as I scrolled down, my heart started to pound. The emails weren't just about business deals, they were about fraud. Mark had been siphoning money from his company's budget into a fake account. Small amounts at first, just a few $100s here and there. But over time, it had added up to thousands. I remembered the expensive watch he suddenly bought, the lavish trips he claimed were company-funded, the way he seemed a little too relaxed about our finances even though his salary hadn't changed. I had taken screenshots that night, saving them in a hidden folder on my phone, unsure of what to do. But now, as I sat at that table, humiliated in front of everyone, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up before Mark. He was still asleep, snoring lightly, his arm draped over my side of the bed like nothing had happened the night before. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I could have confronted him right then and there. I could have thrown the evidence in his face, demanded an apology, screamed at him for all the years he had belittled me. But that would have given him time to prepare, to twist the story, to manipulate me like he always did. No, I needed something bigger. I needed to make sure he couldn't talk his way out of this. So I got up, took my phone, and left the house. Rachel, my best friend, was already waiting for me at the cafe. She had been telling me for years that Mark was no good. She had watched me make excuses for him, had held my hand through every argument, every disappointment. When I showed her the screenshots, her eyes widened. "Emma, this isn't just bad. This is illegal." "I know," I said, gripping my coffee cup, "and I'm going to use it." We spent the next few hours planning. Rachel's brother was a corporate lawyer, and after a quick call, he confirmed what I suspected. Mark could go to jail for this. If I reported him, his career would be over. But I wasn't going to go straight to the authorities. Not yet. First, I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized just how badly he had underestimated me. 2 days later, Mark's company was hosting another event, a formal dinner with executives, clients, and investors, the perfect place for Mark to shine. He had been unusually affectionate since the gala night, probably sensing that something was off. "Babe, you know I didn't mean anything by it," he said that morning, wrapping an arm around my waist as I poured coffee. "You get so sensitive sometimes." I smiled up at him. "I know," I said sweetly. "That's why I planned something special for tonight." He grinned, completely oblivious to what was coming. By the time we arrived at the event, the venue was buzzing with conversation. Mark was in his element, shaking hands, laughing loudly, making sure everyone saw how successful and important he was. I stood beside him, playing my role, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, when he was in the middle of an animated conversation with his boss and the company's biggest investors, I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I wonder what they'd think," I said, my voice calm but firm, "if they knew their most trusted employee had been stealing from them all along." The entire room fell silent. Mark froze, his smile disappearing instantly. He turned to me, eyes wide with panic. "What?" he stammered, his face draining of color. I held up my phone, the screenshots displayed clearly on the screen. "Would you like me to read the emails out loud?" I asked, tilting my head. "Or should I just send them straight to the CEO?" His boss frowned. The investors exchanged glances. A murmur spread through the room. And just like that, Mark's entire world started to crumble. Mark's entire body stiffened. His eyes darted between my phone and his boss, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The laughter, the casual conversations, all of it vanished. The weight of my words had settled over the room like a thick fog. His boss, Mr. Langston, narrowed his eyes. "What is she talking about, Mark?" Mark let out a nervous chuckle, but his voice was too high, too forced. "It's nothing. She's misunderstanding something." He reached for my arm, his fingers tightening around my wrist. "Honey, let's talk about this privately." I yanked my arm away and took a step back. My voice was steady when I said, "Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? Just like how you wanted to talk privately the last time you got caught lying." His face paled. I turned to Mr. Langston, who was now watching Mark with suspicion. "You might want to check the company's financial records. Or better yet, let me make it easier for you." I tapped on my phone and sent the screenshots directly to his inbox. "There. Now you don't have to take my word for it." A sharp ding came from his phone. Mr. Langston pulled it out, his eyebrows furrowing as he scrolled through the messages. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. His expression hardened, his grip tightening around his wine glass. This is company money," he muttered, looking back up at Mark, disgust written all over his face. Mark's entire demeanor shifted. The charm, the arrogance, it all disappeared. He looked small, pathetic. "I can explain." "You can explain it to HR on Monday," Mr. Langston snapped. "Actually, scratch that. You can explain it to a lawyer." He turned to the investors, shaking his head. "I am so sorry you had to witness this." The investors exchanged knowing looks. One of them scoffed. We had a feeling something shady was going on. Mark looked around desperately, but no one met his gaze. The people who had laughed at his jokes, who had clinked glasses with him just minutes ago, were now avoiding him like he was a disease. For the first time in his life, he was the one being humiliated. We left the event in silence. Mark didn't speak to me the entire car ride home. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought he might snap it in half. But as soon as we stepped into the house, the silence shattered. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he exploded, slamming the door shut behind him. I calmly placed my clutch on the counter and turned to face him. "What's wrong with me?" I repeated. "Mark, you stole thousands of dollars. You lied to your company. And after everything I have done for you, You humiliated me in front of all those people. So tell me, what exactly did you expect? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. You just ruined my life. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, Mark, you ruined your own life. I just made sure you finally faced the consequences. His breathing was ragged, his eyes darting around as if searching for a way out of this mess. They're not gonna fire me, he muttered as if trying to convince himself. I can talk my way out of this. I can… Oh, I don't think so, I interrupted. Because guess what? I also sent those files to the company's legal department, and just in case, I sent them to a few news outlets too. His head snapped toward me so fast I thought he might break his neck. You… Yes, Mark. I took a step forward, my voice as cold as ice. You wanted to humiliate me? Well, congratulations. Now the whole world will know exactly who you are. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. The fallout was immediate. By Monday morning, Mark was all over the company's internal news. His name was being whispered in office hallways, his email had been disabled, and his desk had been cleared out before he even arrived. Mr. Langston didn't even give him the courtesy of a private firing. Instead, he had security escort Mark out of the building in front of everyone. The same people who once admired him now watched in amusement as he stumbled out, his face red with shame. I heard through the grapevine that the legal team was preparing to press charges. Apparently, I had uncovered something even bigger than I realized. Mark had been embezzling for years, and I had only scratched the surface. By the time he came home that evening, he was a wreck. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He collapsed onto the couch, rubbing his temples. We can fix this, he muttered, more to himself than to me. We just need to lay low for a while. I let out a slow breath and pulled out a neatly stacked folder from my bag. I placed it in front of him. What's this? He asked suspiciously. Divorce papers. His head shot up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Are you serious? I crossed my arms, completely. Emma, come on, he pleaded, his voice cracking. We can get through this. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. You know what, Mark? I could forgive you. I could give you another chance. His face lit up with hope. But then again, I continued, smiling slightly, you never gave me one. So, no. The hope drained from his face as I turned on my heel and walked away. The weeks that followed were the most freeing of my life. Mark fought the divorce at first, but he didn't have much leverage. The company cut all ties with him, and with an ongoing legal case against him, his money was drying up fast. Meanwhile, I had made sure the divorce lawyer was ruthless. I took my fair share of assets and then some. One afternoon, as I was finalizing some paperwork at my lawyer's office, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was before I even answered. Emma. Mark's voice was hollow, defeated. Please, I don't have anywhere to go. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my pen against the table. Wow, that's funny, because I didn't have anywhere to go that night at the gala when you humiliated me, but you didn't seem too concerned then. He sighed heavily. I messed up, okay? I hung up. And then, for the first time in years, I laughed. Because I wasn't sad. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't weak. I was free. A few months later, I moved into a new apartment, one that I paid for on my own. I reconnected with old friends, started a new job, and even signed up for a public speaking class. Because the woman Mark mocked that night, she didn't exist anymore. And as for Mark? Well, let's just say I heard through the grapevine that he was working a minimum wage job, struggling to keep up with rent. His former colleagues wanted nothing to do with him, and his reputation was ruined. And you know what? I didn't feel bad. Not even a little bit. Because this time, I wasn't the one suffering. He was. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. It's funny how life works. For years, I had bent over backward to make Mark happy, to be the perfect wife, to sacrifice my own dreams so he could chase his. And where did it get me? Public humiliation, betrayal, and a marriage that was nothing more than an illusion. But the moment I chose myself, everything changed. I learned that revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's just about walking away with your head held high while they crumble under their own mistakes. I won't lie and say everything was easy after that. There were days I still felt the sting of betrayal, nights where I lay awake thinking about all the years I had wasted. But with each passing day, I felt lighter, stronger. Now looking back, I realize that Mark did me a favor that night. By humiliating me, he showed me exactly who he was. And in return, I showed him exactly who I became. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone tries to break you, remember this. You don't have to get even. You just have to get better. And trust me, nothing makes them suffer more than watching you thrive without them.